libertarian views, the Department of Education, and risk tolerance. Find out more on the Richard Neese Podcast.
We believe in all the F words: faith, family, football, and fitness. Check us out on the Richard Neese Podcast every Saturday morning on WKUL.
Please subscribe. Please help us out by growing the channel. We want to help good people get to a better place. Hey everybody, Richard Neese here. Thank you guys for tuning in to the Richard Neese Podcast. I'm super excited about today. It's been a wild morning. Had a good conversation beforehand. As always, I have my co-host Dominic Gill here with me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Good morning, everybody.
We're excited about today. It's Friday. We're recording a little bit later. My wife, she was visiting Omaha for some business conference, so now she's back. So that frees me up a little bit more. I'm not a single parent of 4. It seems like she's off taking care of her things. I will say this: she prepped food for me. She had everything ready to go, and I still struggled. So my wife is pretty much a saint. I love you, Catherine. Thank you for taking care of everything, and thank you for letting me do the things that I do. I know, Dominic, you've got a saint on the other side too. So.
Yeah. You can't. I tell you what, though, when you say Omaha, I cannot help but think about Peyton Manning every time you say Omaha.
That's a good point. You know, a lot of people think of Warren Buffett, but I can see Omaha. I can see
yeah.
So, well, she was out there on scooters. My wife owns a Scooters Coffee franchise, and she was out there on a conference. Really cool to see her go from mom to businesswoman mom, all the in between. So. That was a challenge for us because I had been in the workforce, in sales and business and things like that. And she just came to me and said, I want to be a part of the business. I want us to be a power couple. I want to be contributing in that way and not just mom, which that's not taken away from mom in any way at all. She does a great job with our 4 kids, but she wanted to be involved in a different way. She was Rookie of the Year for Scooters Coffee. She had one of the top 5 stores. She does a great job on that side. I'm proud of her for all the stuff that she does on that. But Dom, what all do we have going on as far as topics-wise go today?
So, I figured that Department of Education is a pretty hot topic this weekend. I feel strongly about education in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to public education, because I probably have the least amount of experience in the public education sector of anybody. My children are second generation homeschooled, fully second generation. Both me and my wife came from homeschooled families. Neither one of us spent a single day in a public school at all. In fact, the first time I ever stepped inside of a public school, outside of like football games, but actually being inside of a facility.
Right.
Oh gosh, I was probably 23 years old. Yeah. But it's the first time I ever stepped inside the doors of a hallway of a public school system. So for me, I feel a little bit like an outsider, but yet an insider on the other side of when it comes down to this Department of Education. Because obviously, even though I have no experience with being in the public school system, I'm obviously very familiar with people who have been, as it's nearly everybody that I've been to has went through that. Everybody that I work with has been through that system, you being one of the exceptions, of course.
Ironically, I've got three different perspectives on that. So I went to a public school. I actually went to a public school in Huntsville, which was kind of, I'm not going to call it inner city, but it was more urban than our rural area out here. Mm-hmm. I went to Vinemont, which is a rural area in Coleman County. And then I also went to a public or private school, St. Bernard, and we homeschool our kids. So I've had a little bit of perspective on all of those. And I'll say my thoughts on education have changed tremendously since the time I was in the public school until now. I think we've talked about it on a podcast before, and if we haven't, plenty of people have heard me talk about my thoughts. And I actually said a year ago, that I would love to see the Department of Education disbanded. And lo and behold, look what's happening. It's being cut apart. And the thing is, was it Mark Twain that talked about don't let schooling get in the way of your education, or something along those lines?
I seem to remember that quote in some form or fashion. The one that always comes to my mind is, send your children to Caesar. Don't be surprised when they come back as Romans.
That's right. That's very true.
That's one of the things that comes to my mind when I think of education.
Well, I truly believe that our education system was modeled off an industrial era. It was modeled, even if you look at the Bell systems, if you look at the classes they go to and the structure, it's designed to create a worker. It's designed to create an industrial worker in particular, and not necessarily an entrepreneur, not necessarily a free thinker. If you look at the education system of the Founding Fathers, typically it was wealthier folks that had better education as far as books and schooling, but it was an individual teacher that taught many subjects, but the key on that was logic and reasoning. You learn logic and reasoning on the front end, then you learn facts on the back side, and you weren't as indoctrinated. They wanted you to use your mind as a tool instead of just photocopying whatever you see and regurgitating that.
And so for me, this is something that I'm very unfamiliar with. So when I ask this question, I'm not being in any way trying to bait out an answer that I already know. So in public school systems, is problem-solving ability something that you felt like teaching people problem-solving ability is not something that's really ingrained in kids? It's more of memorization. Is that fair? Because I don't know.
So all I can do is speak to my own experience.
All right.
And my experience was that it was a mill for you to pass the test. First off, it was the test as far as your report card, so you didn't go home and get a whooping. Mm-hmm. And then the other piece of that was graduation. So we wanted to make sure our graduation rate was high. And then we also had the standardized testing. So
right.
Unfortunately, 99% of things come back to money. And funding comes from you doing well on your test. So I remember weeks of preparation for the OLSAT, the SAT, and all that stuff. Not the ACT, I went to a different high school, but I remember the standardized test for each grade, and we had to meet a certain standard in order to get funding, to get money. Otherwise, we'd have less teachers, we'd have less resources. And so there was a whole lot of pressure to pass that test. There was not any pressure on actually learning, but how to test take. And I'll say that I'm a pretty good test taker overall, but when I went to the public school system side, they didn't force any sort of actual logic or reasoning. It was, this is what we have to learn. Once you check that box, as long as you don't misbehave, you're good. Don't worry about it. Does that answer your question?
I believe it does. Like I said, and then again, outside looking in,
And I'll speak to St. Bernard, which was a great experience for me. I went from Vinemont, which it was an okay school. The people, the teachers there were good to me, things like that. I was getting into a little bit of trouble. Nothing too crazy. Going down paths I probably shouldn't go down. I was blessed to be able to go to St. Bernard as a benefit. Now, my mom said I can go there. She allowed me to go there. I got a scholarship there. And when I went there, I'll tell anybody that St. Bernard changed my life, because St. Bernard, the monks there, the teachers there, they taught me how to think. Mm. They taught me how to problem solve. They said, why do you believe that? Not what do you believe, and this is wrong or right, but why do you believe it? There were hard truths there, obviously, but it was a good perspective of making you think deeper. Where did you learn that from? Why do your parents think that? It wasn't an indoctrination of this is the way you have to think. And I'd say what really got me, and I've told this story to you before, as far as education goes, I started moving more away from state-sponsored education, was a study on economics. And if you know anything about economics, or if you studied any, you have John Smith, you have John Maynard Keynes, you have different perspectives on laissez-faire versus Keynes' approach, which was a more government hands-on approach. Well, I remember very specifically that being the way. Well, that is not the only economic system where the government takes part in it. So when they were pushing me down that path, I remember thinking, why am I being fed this? There has to be more than just one truth here, or more opportunities. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So at that point, I realized that book, just because it was printed and said, oh, this is the Alabama whatever, or the United States whatever, it may not all be truth. There's always, who writes history? The victors, right?
Right.
So if you're a victor, you get to write whatever you want, that thing. And if you're not, you don't, even though there may be some truth on your side as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It makes sense on that right there. And again, that's where it comes down to, like, if you even look at indoctrination during the World War II in the Germans during World War II, is that these kids were indoctrinated. I mean, you can remember the youth for Hitler or whatever.
Youth, yep.
Yeah, the Hitler Youth and stuff. These kids were indoctrinated to think a certain way and stuff, because the hand of the government, the parents had no agency over the kids, and so but the hand of the government pushed them in that direction to where they thought other human beings were despicable creatures that need to be eradicated.
Absolutely.
And don't think that can't happen anywhere. So it can happen in the United States, especially when you have institutes like the Department of Education out there where they can have thoughts. And again, you can make an argument about what are these thoughts about,
Sure.
especially we talked about before, what is truth, and their determination of truth. But all that's being said is that if you look at history books and we can see how vile and evil that was, what if the Nazis had won? When history books look at that the same way,
Absolutely.
And obviously, we're people who do have a standard of morals and human dignity and stuff. We can see that evil was defeated in that right there.
That's right.
But who's to say in the next generation that there are current evils that are being propagated right now through our own school system too, yeah. Which I can make some arguments for those. I don't want to get too controversial about those, but and right now that is being painted as truths whenever I look at those as being absolute evils and something that's very detrimental to both the psychological and the morality of our society.
I agree with you on that. And you start thinking about where the Department of Education came from. Was it Jimmy Carter?
Jimmy Carter, yeah.
So Jimmy Carter put it in place. And the goal of that was, it wasn't just about standardizing, test scores. It was really about segregation. It was about schools that weren't taking care of black kids or minorities as a whole, or having complete separate segregated schools where the value wasn't being presented on both schools. And I know there's a lot more storied and studied people that can tell you more about that overall. I've had a conversation about this several times over the past 5 or 6 years where people say, well, if we did that, if we took the state out of that and we didn't standardize, then this community wouldn't have any education. This community wouldn't have any education. And that's where I just keep coming back to, in my opinion, the solution is that our churches and our civic groups need to step up in those ways and create this opportunity to teach. How long has the Catholic Church been teaching across the board? I know there's a bunch of people that are going to say, oh, well, what about the priests and this and that? Of course, there are bad people in every organization.
Oh, how many times hear teachers? When they always judge the male teacher whenever they do inappropriate acts. Female teachers, I mean, that is that's a fantasy for most school boys.
Sure. But you look at it, and the Catholic Church has been educating for so long. And I'll say this about the Islamic faith. They educate as well, and they put together colleges and universities. And if you think about the system of money and really big education systems as a whole, the Jewish people have been doing that for a long time.
Absolutely.
So why are we not stepping in those roles and doing that? Oh, it's because Uncle Sam is taking care of that. So Uncle Sam becomes the new religion. It becomes the new thought leader. And I really struggle with that, especially for me as more of a libertarian, where I think I want to be able to make my own decisions. And I want the government to take care of the roads, take care of civic service as far as fire and health and police, and then take care of the government or the military to protect our borders from people coming in and out and fighting wars. I don't want you to mess with anything else. Stay away from my business, stay away from my kids, stay away from all these things. I keep coming back to that. And when you put these people in education, I have people that don't agree with anything that I say that are telling my kid if they don't do these things, they're going to get D's and F's and this and that. It's literally taking an effect on their psyche, and I'm allowing that to happen as a parent. I've got a real problem with that, and I think Department of Education should not exist. I've said that for a long time. I think we should get rid of it. We got to have some sort of transition. I don't know what that looks like. A lot of smart people, a lot of people smarter than me can help come up with that transition plan, but it needs to go away. We need to take the government out of education. We need people to be educated and be the best they can, because we've gotten worse and worse since the 1970s, since Jimmy Carter.
And we're spending more and more money on it as
Absolutely.
Well. And again, it always comes down to where the thought process of it takes a village.
Sure.
And I fundamentally disagree with that completely, because whenever you rely on the village, don't be surprised when they're getting raised by the village idiots.
Yeah.
I
agree with that.
So what ends up happening is that you're allowing things out of your control in order to influence and raise your children, and you won't have any say-so in the matter at all, because you're trusting the village to do its job. But then yet you look around, you criticize your village, you look around, you disagree with your village, but yet you still give your children to the village to be raised. It's hypocrisy in a lot of ways. And as parents, our first responsibility is to take agency over our children, and that we should go and look out for what is truly in their best interest, and not dump them off to the first aid care as soon as that they're able to get broke away from, not dump them off to the school systems pre-K. You know, kindergarten was supposed to be before school was kindergarten. Now they have school before school. Now they got, you got everything that leads up to getting them out of the house. So someone else can be, that your kids could be someone else's problem, because you don't want to deal with your own problem, because you're trying, and a lot of it's probably mainly because you're trying to provide an income for your little problems that you have at home.
Yeah.
And again, trust me, as someone who has got 8 problems, we deal with that ourselves.
So you led right into where I wanted to go with that is, well, you have to have an income. Well, why do you have to have an income? Well, because we don't have enough money to support our whole family. What does that mean? We are so in love with the marketplace. We are so in love with consumerism that we are willing to give up our children in order to have those things that we think that we need or that we want. That's the crazy part to me. If you want to invest time, invest something, invest them into your kids, invest them into your family, spend more time with them. I run multiple businesses. I love dedicated people, but I also know that at some point, if you lose the family basis, and you're a terrible employee, you never know what's going to happen. You have to have something to balance you in that way. So I just keep coming back to, let's stop worshiping the dollar. Let's truly look at our finances. Let's learn about finances, because that's what we're not learning about in school. We don't know how to balance a checkbook. Why? Because we need to go to a government job. We need to go to a plant job, a factory job, get our paycheck, get our cheese and our bread, and then go through and do it again and again and again. It gets ridiculous. Learn how to make money.
Do it for 45 years and then wait, then you retire at 65 when your best years of your life is gone, and you spent the best years of your life giving it to somebody else. Absolutely. And not even giving it to your children when your children needed you the most.
Yeah, you don't know who they are. You don't know you don't know your grandkids. And guess what? When you die, half of your dang money goes to Uncle Sam at that point. Yeah. So you just worked all that time, paid him in taxes, all these different ways. For what? Let's create value. Let's figure out ways to be better with our money. I'm not opposed to consumerism. If you want to go buy stuff, buy stuff. But no, you're trading time and time with your family and maybe your entire life for this thing. If it's worth it to you, by all means, as a libertarian, I say go do it. I'm not going to tell you how to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But let's stop indoctrinating kids on the front end that we have to do this government-based, industrial-based system.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't agree with you more. I mean, and in a lot of ways, growing up as a homeschool kid, I'm not going to go and pretend that there wasn't resentment on my end for being different.
Sure.
There was plenty of resentment in my lifetime.
The times have changed now. I mean, there are,
and
especially
again,
with COVID.
Oh, well, yeah. Not just that, but whenever I was being homeschooled, you're talking about this is the 90s. You talk about being a freak, being homeschooled in the 90s. Nowadays, my kids are going to have it so much easier. There's so many more opportunities and activities for our children to be socialized or whatever. You get out in public as a homeschool kid, people looked at you funny back in the 90s, the 80s and the 90s. We were one of the pioneer families in homeschooling. And my dad was the first Catholic. He started the first Catholic organization of homeschoolers in the state of Alabama, and the first Christian organization of homeschooling in the state of Louisiana. So we were on the forefront. So we got the dings, we got the bruises. We're the ones who had to go and suffer through. Sure. And again, I say suffer, they're more like inconveniences. But it's like had to go and deal with the looks, the stares. We created the stereotypes. We were the originators of the stereotype of everything. So
Dominic, the irony or the transition period. So you talk about you guys being the forefront, but you think about kids in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s that, especially in the South, half the time they were working at home in the fields or doing whatever else, taking time off for that type of stuff. Whereas now, when you get into the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, when you're talking about that period, there isn't that. So you're kind of up between that time frame when a lot of people have more income, and so they're working that second job, or mom and dad are both working second jobs. And so that transition time frame when this is really weird because we're chasing the dollar, we're chasing the American dream, and now those people are like, holy cow, who are my kids?
Yeah,
and they have no idea who they are. So I'd like to talk about a couple other things. We got on this topic, we haven't even really hit with Donald Trump and him working towards that. You want to give a quick synopsis on what's going on with the Department of Education and what they're doing?
So right now, he's just taking the first steps, and I don't know officially what it is, but basically my understanding is that it's going to start having to go through Congress in order to go and dissolve the Department of Education. And again, it's, for me, I couldn't be happier about it, just because, not because of the financial waste that's there,
Sure.
but in the smaller level, as much as we were talking about not having the village, being involved in raising your family, well, at least it's going to be a little bit more localized so that you can actually have a direct impact in some form or fashion, that you can actually go out there to the poll booth and vote for people specifically for your children. It's not going to be some nationalized education system to where they're putting California principles, California morals onto Alabama kids, and vice versa. Alabama morals, Alabama principles on Californians. It's not it. People in Alabama can go and have more agency for the people that for their own children. Again, it's not going to be like complete agency, but at least they have some voice in some way. So to me, getting rid of the nationalization of the Department of Education, the federal side of it all, it puts it back into the states. The states can do with it as they could do a better job with it, and can have more consequences and accountability to its own voting members of that state, to where that if things aren't going right or wrong, that we would have at least some voice in being able to change that.
I was having a conversation about that the other day with a friend of mine, and we were discussing when this transition happened. So I don't want to get censored or banned or anything like that, but a lot of people argue I'm not a Southern Brotherhood, Confederacy, all that stuff. I'm not waving my Confederate flag outside. But underlying issues that happened during the Civil War were states' rights versus federal rights.
Right.
No doubt there was a fight for slavery and human rights and things like that, but it really came down to states' rights. And do the states have the ability to rule themselves individually with a banner, a federation over the top of it? Or is the federal government the ruling supreme, and then we tell the states like little brothers what to do no matter what? That's the question. Dominic, what would your thoughts be on that? Because my perspective is that our foundation was similar to like the EU. So you have sovereign countries in each area that have history, and then there's a banner over the top of them called the European Union.
Right.
So the United States of America was a similar concept. Actually, it was the concept, right? So you had these small little countries that we call states that band together for strength, and each one of them can have their own agency. Each one of them can have their own way of doing things, and then you have a general banner for protection and for bigger issues.
Mainly for military. I mean, the formation of the federal government was for the military, and the reason for the president of the United States. That's why it's called the commander-in-chief. That's what the chief reasons for that is the fact that it's more about having the military protection as a unit, as the United States, that we all can go and live in relative freedom to govern ourselves on a state level with protections, with the protection of the federal government to protect our rights. Because if each one of us had our own individual states and then we all go into many wars with each other, first of all, we'd probably all lose to Texas. Texas
Which was its own country.
That just because of the manpower and the firepower that they have over there. But because we have the protection of the United States, that we are able to rule in a more sovereign way down the state level for our own individual government. And the federal government should have no business whatsoever into our education system.
I agree. And they shouldn't be telling us where to go to the bathroom either, or who can call who what. I mean, let's look at big picture items, and let's stop having the federal government usurp each state's rights. That's what I keep coming back to. Now, do I want human rights violations going on? No. But who defines that? Where do we get to that point? Because at this point, we were going so far left in the last administration that human rights violations could be me saying something mean to you and then you put me in jail. Oh, wait, that's happening in Europe right now. Yeah. You put mean tweets out or mean X, whatever it's called, and I can literally be held accountable for that. That is insane to me. Where is the freedom of speech? We were rapidly moving down that direction. And whether you like Donald Trump, whether you don't like him, he is moving us back to what I call the center. I don't think he's moving us right, but he's got a pull on the right side.
It's crazy and it's crazy how many people paint him as like some kind of ultra conservative. He is not. No stretch of imagination, especially by what I feel is the standard for conservatism.
Sure.
It's nowhere close to it all.
And Dominic, you're much more conservative than I am in a lot of things, especially on the Catholic side and pulling that way. But here's the thing. I want you to be able to decide what you want to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also want that person that is atheist vegan to be able to decide what they want to do, as long as it doesn't hurt children, people that can't defend themselves, as long as it doesn't hurt somebody else. Do what you want to do. I don't care if you never eat meat again. It doesn't matter to me. And for me, if I want to eat meat every single day and die of a heart attack at age 38, okay, that's my right to do that. Stop telling me what I have to do, Uncle Sam. Stop telling me what I have to do, Governor Ivy. I want to be able, if I'm not breaking the law, leave me alone. Stop regulating me to death in my business and my personal life. That's where I'm at. And you can call me a libertarian. You can call me conservative as far as fiscally. I don't really care. I just want to be left alone. That's it. I mean, how do you feel about that as far as the states' rights go, Don?
Obviously, it's hard to disagree with that. I think deep down, everyone agrees with that. It's like, leave me alone at a level. Whenever they start getting the disagreements is whenever we start getting these politically charged conversations, and then our team banners go up.
That's right.
I think that's where it really is.
Team banners, abortion. Oh, team banner goes up.
Yeah, exactly.
Even though I may do everything that is not conservative as a Republican, I may do all these things that you don't agree with. As soon as I say, oh, well, I'm against abortion, and now I've got to be on your side, no matter what. Let's have 6 parties if we're going to do that. Let's truly get represented if we're going to do something like that. Instead of having left and right, let's have all the different parties.
Yeah, and that will never happen. The two-party system would never allow that to be.
No, absolutely.
I mean, and again, it's...
just a few.
The closest thing that we ever had to that is the MAGA movement. That's the closest thing that we have, and they basically
Tea Party, and then I do think that the left has some movements that pull further left and stuff like that. But the mainstream parties will not allow it. They're going to crush it. They're going to make sure you're on a list and go to jail, and then the Clintons make a phone call or something like that. Or on the right side, you just get shamed into, I can't believe you would allow them to win because you're not voting for our rhino. I mean, it gets ridiculous, man. And then I don't want a ton of faith stuff in our Congress. I don't want it in the White House. You look at faith-based stuff. Well, my faith is good, but Islam's not good, or Buddhism isn't good. So let's keep it out. Let's have it function as a true government agency. You take care of these roles and cut out the rest of them.
Basic human rights.
That's right.
Basic human rights.
That's right.
And just rights of. And again, free speech will sort itself out when it comes down to everything else.
Oh, yeah.
And don't interfere with that. And let the churches, let the mosque, let them deal with the religion and stuff.
Sure.
And
Dominic, I was supposed to talk about risk. I was supposed to talk about a bunch of other stuff, but you got me fired up about this. States' rights, smaller government. That's what I want to see. Let's have more accountability for the people we vote for. Hey, still a republic. I'm not saying we need a true democracy where the idiots vote for every single thing, because that's not a good thing either. But personally, give me what I want to do, and if it's not breaking the law, stay out of my business. That's where I end up at.
Yeah.
Dominic, I'll let you close it out, man. We can talk about our social media. You're done. So I'll let you hammer on.
Yes, sir. So we're now going. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. Both of them at the Richard Neese Podcast. I almost said the Richard Neese Team. Both at the Richard Neese Podcast. Also find us on YouTube. Of course, right here in WKUL 92.1 FM in Coleman, Alabama, and then also TikTok, to where we are. Getting a lot of, it seems to be gaining a lot of traction on TikTok. We're getting a lot of activity on the old TikToks, and all my people that I know that I work with daily, especially my old Happy Homes family. Y'all probably never will see this because y'all don't watch the YouTube videos, but
especially not to leave.
Appreciate y'all reaching out to me and letting me know that you've been enjoying our content.
Absolutely. You guys have a great day.
Like and subscribe.